Chapter 1. The Foundation Cracks. Rick Caldwell had always prided himself on reading people. 20 years in military intelligence, the last 8 with the NSA's Special Activities Division, had taught him to spot lies from across a room. So when his wife Ashley started working late 3 nights a week and coming home with that particular glow women get when they're keeping secrets, Rick knew exactly what was happening. He just hadn't expected it to be with her divorce lawyer. Standing in their kitchen on a Tuesday morning, watching Ashley fumble with her phone when it buzzed, Rick felt the familiar cold settle in his chest. The same feeling he'd had in Baghdad when an asset went dark, or in Moscow when a contact started asking too many questions. Bradley says the paperwork should be ready by Friday, Ashley said, not meeting his eyes. Bradley Cooper, the high-powered family attorney she'd hired 6 months ago when they'd started talking about separation. Rick had suggested mediation. Ashley had insisted on lawyers. Convenient, Rick said, sipping his coffee. Guess you two have been working real close on those papers. Ashley's face flushed. What's that supposed to mean? Rick had been married to Ashley Hurley for 12 years. They'd met at a military charity gala in D.C. when he was still active duty. She was beautiful, ambitious, working her way up at a marketing firm. They'd had good years, before his assignments started keeping him away for months at a time, before the nightmares started, before Ashley decided she wanted a different life than the one that came with being married to a man who couldn't talk about his work. But he'd never seen her look at him the way she'd been looking at her phone lately. Nothing, Rick said. Just seems like you and your lawyer have developed a real, professional relationship. Ashley slammed her mug down. You know what, Rick? This is exactly why we're getting divorced. Your paranoia, your suspicion. I can't have a conversation without you acting like I'm some kind of enemy operative. The irony wasn't lost on him. In his line of work, paranoia had kept him alive in 17 countries. At home, it was killing his marriage. You're right, he said quietly. I'm sorry. But Rick Caldwell had learned long ago that being sorry and being right weren't mutually exclusive. And the look in Ashley's eyes when she thought he wasn't watching told him everything he needed to know about her and Bradley Cooper. After Ashley left for work, Rick sat in his study, surrounded by the memorabilia of a career he couldn't discuss. Commendations he couldn't frame. Awards for operations that officially never happened. On his desk, next to a photo of him and Ashley from their honeymoon in Italy, lay the separation agreement Bradley had drawn up. It was brutal. Ashley got the house, half his pension, alimony, and most of their assets. Rick got his truck and whatever personal items he could carry. He'd agreed to it all because he loved her. Because he thought maybe if he gave her what she wanted, they could find their way back to each other. Looking at the papers now, Rick realized how naive that had been. This wasn't about saving a marriage. This was about Ashley moving on to something better. Someone better. Someone like Bradley Cooper, whose BMW Rick had seen parked 2 blocks from their house last Wednesday night, when Ashley was supposedly at book club. Rick opened his laptop and began typing. Old habits died hard, and researching targets was like riding a bicycle. By lunch, he knew that Bradley Cooper was 38, divorced twice, owned a law firm specializing in high-net-worth divorces, and had a reputation for being very hands-on with his female clients. Very hands-on indeed. Chapter 2. Intelligence Gathering. The Starbucks on 5th Street had excellent sight lines to Bradley Cooper's law office and terrible coffee. Rick had been nursing the same cup for 2 hours, watching the comings and goings of Cooper and Associates while typing on his laptop. To anyone watching, he looked like another middle-aged guy working remotely. They couldn't see the encrypted partition on his hard drive where he was cataloging everything he observed, or the high-definition camera with telephoto lens disguised as a water bottle in his backpack. At 2:47 p.m., Ashley's silver Lexus pulled into the parking garage beneath Bradley's building. She emerged 8 minutes later, hair slightly mussed, lipstick gone. Rick felt something cold and sharp twist in his chest, but his hands remained steady as he photographed her exit. His phone buzzed. Text from Ashley. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. Rick smiled grimly and typed back. No problem. Love you. But Rick Caldwell had spent his career in the shadows, and he knew how to use them. By Thursday, he had Bradley's schedule memorized. Coffee at 8:15 a.m. at the cafe across from his office. Lunch meetings at Chez Laurent every Tuesday and Friday. Tennis at the country club Wednesday evenings. More importantly, he'd identified the patterns that mattered. Ashley visited Bradley's office every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Always between 2:30 and 3 p.m. Always for exactly 45 minutes to an hour. Their divorce consultation was supposedly over. The papers were drawn up, ready to sign. There was no legal reason for those visits to continue. Friday afternoon, Rick made a decision that would have horrified the Rick Caldwell of 6 months ago, the one who still believed his marriage could be saved. He planted a listening device in Ashley's car. The conversation he heard that evening told him everything he needed to know. When are you going to tell him? Bradley's voice, smooth and confident. Soon. I just need to be sure about the timeline. Ashley sounded nervous. Babe, we've been over this. The divorce will be final in 2 weeks. Then we can stop sneaking around. What if he fights it? Rick's not stupid, Bradley. He knows things. A pause. Then Bradley's laugh, cold and dismissive. What's he going to do? Your husband's a washed-up veteran living in the past. I'm an attorney with connections all over this city. Trust me, by the time I'm done with him, Rick Caldwell will be lucky to keep the clothes on his back. Rick sat in his truck in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, listening to the recording on repeat. Each playback brought a deeper understanding of just how thoroughly he'd been played. Ashley hadn't wanted a separation. She'd wanted an upgrade. And Bradley Cooper, successful attorney, country club member, BMW driver, saw Rick as nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. That night, Rick made another decision. He opened a secure communication channel he hadn't used since leaving the NSA 2 years earlier. 3 messages went out to 3 different contacts. By morning, he had what he needed to begin his real work. Because Bradley Cooper was about to learn something that Rick's former colleagues knew well. Underestimating Rick Caldwell was the last mistake you'd ever make. Chapter 3. The Perfect Storm. The divorce papers arrived by courier on a Monday morning, while Rick was replacing the garbage disposal Ashley had been complaining about for months. The irony wasn't lost on him. She'd be someone else's problem to fix things for soon enough. Rick signed the papers without reading them. He already knew what they said. More importantly, he knew they were just the opening move in a much larger game. That afternoon, he received a call from Eleanor Hayes, a forensic accountant, who owed him a favor from Beirut. Her voice was professionally neutral, but he could hear the concern underneath. Rick, that law firm you asked me to look into? Cooper and Associates? They're clean on the surface, but there are some interesting patterns in their client trust accounts. Interesting how? Funds moving in and out in amounts that don't match the legal fees. Large cash deposits that disappear within days. And several clients who seem to exist only on paper. Rick smiled. Bradley Cooper was running a classic money laundering operation through his law practice. Client confidentiality and attorney-client privilege made it nearly impossible to investigate. Nearly impossible. Eleanor, I need you to dig deeper. Full financial analysis. I don't care what it costs. Rick, Eleanor's voice carried a warning. Whatever you're planning, be careful. Men like Bradley Cooper have powerful friends. So do I. The second call came from Neil Landry, a former Delta Force operator turned private security consultant. Neil's report was equally interesting. Your boy Bradley has expensive habits. High-stakes poker games twice a week in the back room of a restaurant downtown. We're talking $50,000 buy-ins. He's also got a thing for college girls. Real young college girls. And he's not shy about using his position to impress them. Rick felt pieces clicking into place. Any proof? Working on it. But Rick, word is he's connected. State Senator Larry, where is his cousin? They play golf together every Sunday. Political connections. Money laundering. Predatory behavior with young women. Bradley Cooper was exactly the kind of target Rick had spent his career neutralizing. The third call came from Joseph McCann, his former handler at NSA. Joseph's voice was carefully neutral when he called back. Rick, what you're asking for, it's complicated. How complicated? The kind that could land us both in federal prison if anyone finds out. Rick stared out his kitchen window at the house he'd bought for Ashley, the life he'd built for them. Joe, remember Kandahar? When that IED took out the convoy, and we were trapped behind enemy lines for 3 days? I remember. You told me then that sometimes the only way out is through. That sometimes you have to be willing to burn everything down to save what matters. A long pause. What matters isn't your marriage anymore, is it? No. What matters is making sure people like Bradley Cooper don't get to destroy everything decent in this world. I'll send you what you need. But Rick, after this, we're even. No more favors. Understood. By Thursday, Rick had everything he needed for phase 1 of his plan. Eleanor's financial analysis, Neil's surveillance photos, and from Joseph, something that would have been impossible for a civilian to obtain, Bradley Cooper's complete digital footprint for the past 3 years. Every email, every text message, every online search, every financial transaction. Bradley Cooper had been very busy and very careless. Friday morning, Rick called Ashley at work. "Hey, honey, I've been thinking about what you said, about us needing space to figure things out. Maybe you should stay somewhere else for a while. Give us both time to think." Ashley's relief was audible. "Are you sure? Where will I go?" "I'm sure Bradley can help you find somewhere suitable." That evening, Rick watched from his study window as Ashley packed 2 suitcases and loaded them into her car. She'd be staying at Bradley's penthouse downtown. They thought they were being discreet. They had no idea they were walking into a trap that had been 3 weeks in the making. As Ashley's taillights disappeared down the street, Rick opened his laptop and began typing. By morning, several very interesting packages would be on their way to some very important people. The game was about to begin. Chapter 4, The Confrontation. Rick was cleaning his service pistol when they arrived. Old habits from military intelligence died hard. Weapons maintenance was meditation, a way to center himself before operations. The familiar weight of the Sig Sauer P226 in his hands brought back muscle memory from a dozen countries where preparedness meant survival. The knock on his door came at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Rick had been expecting it since Monday, when his packages had been delivered to their targets. He holstered the pistol, checked the recording devices he'd placed throughout the house, and answered the door. Bradley Cooper stood on his porch holding an eviction notice, looking every inch the successful attorney in his $1,000 suit. Behind him lurked Emmanuel Bartlett, a massive man Rick recognized from Neil's surveillance photos as Bradley's security consultant. Former bouncer turned muscle for hire. Rick Caldwell. Bradley's voice carried the smug confidence of a man who thought he held all the cards. "That's me." Bradley thrust the papers forward. "This is an eviction notice. You have 72 hours to vacate these premises." Rick looked at the documents without taking them. "Interesting. Last I checked, my name was still on the deed." "Not anymore." Bradley's smile was cold. "Your wife gave me power of attorney to handle her interests in this property. As of this morning, she owns this house outright. Community property division in your divorce settlement." Rick felt the familiar calm settle over him, the same detachment that had served him well in interrogation rooms from Kabul to Kiev. "Is that so? And where exactly is my wife?" "Ashley is somewhere safe, away from your increasingly erratic behavior. She's concerned about potential violence." Behind Bradley, Emmanuel cracked his knuckles. The message was clear. Violence. Rick stepped back, gesturing them inside. "Gentlemen, please. Let's discuss this like civilized people." They followed him into the living room. Rick noticed how Bradley's eyes swept the space, cataloging valuables, while Emmanuel positioned himself between Rick and the front door. "Here's how this is going to work," Bradley said, settling into Rick's favorite chair without invitation. "You're going to pack a bag, sign a few papers relinquishing any claim to this property, and disappear. Ashley wants a clean break. No alimony disputes, no property fights, no drama. And if I refuse?" Bradley nodded toward Emmanuel. "Then we'll have to discuss things differently. Ashley is prepared to file restraining orders, claim domestic violence, whatever it takes. With my connections in family court, you'll be lucky to avoid jail time." Rick walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back in parade rest. "You know, Bradley, I've been thinking about our mutual acquaintance. Senator Larry Ware. Your cousin, right?" Bradley's confident expression flickered slightly. "What about him?" "Well, Senator Ware sits on the Senate Banking Committee. Interesting position for a man whose cousin runs cash through client trust accounts for the Kozlov crime family." The room went dead silent. Emmanuel's hand moved toward his jacket, but Bradley held up a restraining finger. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Rick turned back to face them, noting how Bradley's face had gone pale beneath his artificial tan. "Sure you do. Dmitry Kozlov needs to clean money from his trafficking operations. You provide legal services to shell companies that don't exist. Funds flow in, legal fees flow out. Very clever. You're delusional." Rick pulled out his phone. "Maybe. Or maybe the FBI's Financial Crimes Division will find the evidence I sent them yesterday very illuminating." Complete financial records going back 3 years. Communication logs. Even some very interesting photographs from your poker games. Bradley shot to his feet. You have nothing. I have everything. Rick's voice remained calm, conversational. Want to see what really spooked me? He swiped to a photograph on his phone. Bradley in the back room of Romano's restaurant, stacks of cash on the table, shaking hands with a man Rick knew was wanted by Interpol. Emmanuel, you might want to distance yourself from this. Racketeering charges carry serious time. The big man shifted uncomfortably, suddenly looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Bradley's composure cracked completely. You think you're smart? You think your military background makes you untouchable? He stepped closer, voice rising. I have connections you can't imagine. I'll destroy you. With what? Rick asked quietly. Your cousin the senator? He'll be too busy explaining his own finances to help anyone. Your friends and family court? They'll run for cover when the headlines hit. Bradley's face had gone from pale to flushed red. Get out. Get out of this house now. He shoved Rick hard in the chest. Rick barely moved, but his expression changed. The polite mask slipped away, revealing something much colder underneath. That was a mistake, Rick said softly. He held up his phone again, this time showing a video file. You just committed assault in front of a recording device. And Emmanuel, that bulge under your jacket? Concealed carry without a permit is a felony in this state. Emmanuel's hand moved away from his jacket like he'd been burned. But here's the best part, Rick continued, his voice taking on the tone of a professor delivering a lecture. Remember that package I sent to the FBI? I also sent copies to the IRS, the state attorney general, and a very talented investigative journalist at the Washington Post. Bradley's face went ashen. You're bluffing. Rick smiled, and for the first time since they'd arrived, it was genuinely amused. Bradley, you're about to learn something that men much smarter than you discovered the hard way. He paused, letting the silence stretch. The NSA never forgets. Bradley stared at the phone screen, and Rick watched as understanding dawned in his eyes. What he was seeing wasn't just a random photo or video. It was a complete digital profile, the kind of comprehensive intelligence package that only someone with very specific skills and very dangerous connections could assemble. The kind of package that could destroy a man's life with surgical precision. Bradley Cooper, successful attorney and would-be destroyer of lives, suddenly looked like what he really was. A small-time criminal who had bitten off far more than he could chew. And then, to Rick's complete satisfaction, Bradley Cooper wet himself. Chapter 5, The Web Titans. The FBI raid on Cooper and Associates happened at 6:17 a.m. on a Thursday morning. Rick watched it unfold from a coffee shop across the street, sipping espresso and reading the morning news on his tablet, while federal agents carried boxes of evidence out of Bradley's office. His phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. Rick, we need to talk. Something terrible has happened. He typed back, I'll be right over. Bradley's penthouse was chaos when Rick arrived. Ashley sat on the leather sofa in her bathrobe, mascara streaked down her cheeks, while Bradley paced behind her like a caged animal. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city looked peaceful and normal, a stark contrast to the panic filling the room. Rick, thank God you're here, Ashley said, jumping up to embrace him. Rick accepted the hug stiffly, noting how naturally she fell back into seeking his protection when her world crumbled. What's going on? They arrested 3 of my partners, Bradley said without preamble. Froze all the firm's accounts. I'm ruined. That's terrible, Rick said, managing to sound concerned. What are they saying you did? Bradley shot him a sharp look. Money laundering. Racketeering. Conspiracy. It's all lies. Of course it is, Rick said soothingly. I'm sure this will all get cleared up. Ashley wiped her eyes. Bradley says they might come after me too. Because you've been having an affair, Rick finished gently. I know, Ashley. I've known for months. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Ashley looked like she might throw up. Rick, she started. I can explain. You don't need to explain anything, Rick said. We both know our marriage was over long before Bradley came along. I just wish you'd been honest about it. Bradley stepped forward. Look, Caldwell, I know this is awkward, but Ashley and I are in love, Rick nodded. I get it. These things happen. His phone rang. The caller ID showed Neil Landry's number. Excuse me, I need to take this. Rick walked to the window, turning his back on them. Neil. Rick, we have a problem. Remember those college girls I mentioned? One of them just filed a police report. Claims Bradley assaulted her after a poker game last month. Rick kept his voice neutral. That's unfortunate. Gets worse. Turns out she's Senator Ware's niece. Christina Ware, 20 years old, Georgetown student. Very credible witness. Rick closed his eyes, feeling a flicker of something that might have been sympathy for Bradley. Might have been. Any physical evidence. Hospital records. Photos. She was smart enough to get examined immediately afterward. Thanks for the heads up. Rick hung up and turned back to find Ashley and Bradley staring at him. Who was that? Bradley asked. Work, Rick said vaguely. Look, I should go. This is really between you two. Ashley grabbed his arm. Rick, wait. I know I've hurt you, but we've been together 12 years. Doesn't that mean anything? Rick looked down at her hand on his arm, remembering when her touch meant everything to him. It means everything, Ashley. That's why I want you to be happy. What if I made a mistake? She whispered. What if I want to come home? Bradley's face darkened. Ashley, we've talked about this. You can't just. Can't what? Rick asked mildly. Can't change her mind? Can't realize she made an error in judgment? The two men stared at each other. Rick could see the exact moment when Bradley recognized the trap he'd walked into. Ashley was vulnerable, scared, looking for an anchor in the storm that was about to engulf Bradley's life. And Rick was offering to be that anchor. This is ridiculous, Bradley snapped. Ashley, tell him. Tell him you love me. Ashley looked between them, confusion and fear warring in her expression. I don't know what I want anymore. Rick's phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made him smile. Prominent attorney accused of sexual assault on senator's niece. Oh my, Rick said, holding up his phone. Bradley, I think you might want to see this. Bradley snatched the phone, his face going white as he read. This is impossible. Christina, she was willing. She wanted. She was 20 years old and drunk, Rick said quietly. You were a powerful attorney with connections. What did you think would happen? Ashley read over Bradley's shoulder, her expression shifting from confusion to horror. Bradley, you told me you'd never. You said those rumors weren't true. They're not. Bradley shouted. This is a setup. Someone's orchestrating this. Rick tilted his head thoughtfully. That's an interesting theory. Who would have that kind of capability? Who would know enough about your business to coordinate federal raids, media leaks, and witness statements? Bradley stared at him, understanding dawning slowly. You did this. Did what? Rick asked innocently. You set me up. The money laundering, the girl, all of it. Rick shook his head. Bradley, I think the stress is getting to you. I'm just a washed-up veteran, remember? What could someone like me possibly do to a successful attorney with connections all over the city? Ashley was backing away from both of them, finally seeing the bigger picture. Rick, what's he talking about? I have no idea, Rick said. Bradley's under a lot of pressure. Sometimes people lash out when their world falls apart. Bradley lunged forward, grabbing Rick by the shirt. You think you're clever? You think you've won? I still have friends, still have. He stopped mid-sentence as Rick's expression went completely cold. Take your hands off me, Rick said quietly. Something in his voice made Bradley release his grip and step back. Now, Rick continued, straightening his shirt. I think it's time I took my wife home. Ashley looked between them, torn between fear and confusion. Finally, she nodded. As they walked toward the door, Rick paused and looked back at Bradley. Oh, and Bradley, you might want to call your cousin the senator. I have a feeling he's going to be very busy explaining some campaign contributions he received from your shell companies. The last thing Rick saw as the door closed was Bradley Cooper collapsing into a chair, his head in his hands, finally understanding the scope of his defeat. Outside in the hallway, Ashley grabbed Rick's arm. What just happened in there? Rick smiled at her, the same warm smile she'd fallen in love with 12 years ago. Justice, he said simply. Chapter 6, Unraveling Threads. The drive home was silent except for the soft sound of Ashley crying in the passenger seat. Rick kept his eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel, processing the success of his operation while calculating the variables that remained. I'm sorry, Ashley whispered as they pulled into their driveway. Rick, I'm so sorry. I know, he said, turning off the engine. Come on, let's go inside. The house felt different now. What had been a monument to his failure 12 hours ago was now simply home again. Ashley moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching familiar objects as if reassuring herself they were real. How long have you known? She asked, settling onto the couch. About Bradley? 3 weeks. And you didn't say anything? Rick sat across from her, maintaining distance. What was I supposed to say? Please don't leave me for the man who's obviously making you happier than I ever could. Ashley flinched. It wasn't like that. What was it like? She was quiet for a long moment, struggling with words. You were gone so much when you were in the service. And when you came back, you were different, distant, like you were still carrying pieces of those places with you. Rick nodded. It was true. The work had changed him in ways he couldn't undo. Bradley made me feel normal again, she continued. Like I was just a woman someone wanted to be with, not a military wife managing a household alone while waiting for bad news. And now, Ashley's laugh was bitter. Now I find out the man I thought I loved is a criminal who assaults college students. So maybe my judgment isn't as good as I thought. Rick's phone rang. Joseph McCann's number appeared on the screen. I need to take this, he said, stepping into the kitchen. Rick, we have a problem. Joseph's voice was tight with urgency. Bradley Cooper just called Senator Ware. We're called someone at Justice. They're asking questions about how the FBI got their intelligence. Rick felt his stomach drop. How bad is it? Bad enough. Ware's not stupid. He knows the kind of surveillance data in that package could only come from NSA assets. If they start digging, they'll trace it back to you. And then to you. Rick, you need to disappear. Tonight. I can arrange extraction, new identity, relocation overseas. Rick looked through the kitchen doorway at Ashley, who was staring out the window at the life they'd built together. What's the timeline? 48 hours, maybe less. Ware's already making calls. By tomorrow morning, there'll be federal agents looking for answers about Rick Caldwell. Rick closed his eyes. He'd known this was a possibility when he'd asked Joseph for help. Using classified surveillance capabilities against American citizens was treason, no matter how justified it felt. Joe, is there another way? Not unless Bradley Cooper and Senator Ware both decide to keep their mouths shut about how they think this happened. Through the window, Rick watched a black sedan pull up across the street. 2 men in suits got out, surveying the neighborhood. They weren't trying to be subtle. Joe, I think my timeline just got shorter. What do you see? Federal agents. They're not here to arrest me yet, or they'd have come to the door. This is reconnaissance. Rick, you need to run. Now. Rick watched Ashley in the living room, finally understanding why he'd really gone after Bradley Cooper. It wasn't about revenge or justice. It was about being able to look at himself in the mirror again. I'm not running, Joe. Rick, listen to me. No, you listen. I destroyed Bradley Cooper because he deserved it. If that costs me everything, so be it. This isn't just about you anymore. If they connect me to this operation, they won't, Rick said quietly. Because I'm going to give them a better story. He hung up the phone and walked back to the living room. Ashley looked up at him, her eyes red but clear. Rick, who was that? Work, he said, settling beside her on the couch. For the first time in months, she didn't pull away when he sat close. I need to tell you something, he said. About what happened to Bradley. Ashley turned to face him fully. I had a feeling you were involved somehow. The timing was too convenient. It wasn't a coincidence. Rick met her eyes. I destroyed him, Ashley. Systematically, thoroughly, and with extreme prejudice. She stared at him for a long moment. Because of me? Because of us. Because he thought we were nothing. Because he thought he could take what mattered to me and throw away what was left. Rick, Ashley's voice was barely a whisper. What did you do? Rick told her everything. The surveillance, the financial investigation, the digital intelligence package, the orchestrated leak to multiple agencies. He explained how he'd used his NSA connections to access information that should have been impossible for a civilian to obtain. When he finished, Ashley was quiet for a long time. You committed treason, she said finally. Yes. To protect me. To protect us. To protect the idea that some things are worth fighting for, even when they're already lost. Ashley looked out the window at the black sedan. Those men are here for you. Probably. What happens now? Rick smiled, feeling lighter than he had in months. Now we find out if what we had was worth saving. Outside, one of the federal agents was talking on his phone. Rick recognized the body language. They were waiting for orders. Ashley, I need you to listen carefully. In about 10 minutes, those men are going to knock on our door. They're going to arrest me for conspiracy, treason, and probably a dozen other federal crimes. Rick, you can't. I can and I will. But first, I need to know something. He He took her hands in his. If I'd asked you 3 months ago to come with me, to leave everything behind and start over somewhere new, would you have said yes? Ashley looked into his eyes, seeing past the careful control to the man underneath. The man who'd spent his career protecting people who would never know his name, who'd saved her from a predator she'd been too blind to recognize, who'd risked everything just to prove that love was worth fighting for. Yes, she whispered. I would have said yes. Rick leaned forward and kissed her forehead. Then we're going to be okay. The knock on the door came exactly when Rick predicted it would. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. Special Agent Margie Richmond was everything Rick expected from a senior federal investigator. Sharp-eyed, no-nonsense, and carrying herself with the confidence of someone who'd seen every lie criminals could tell. She sat across from Rick at the kitchen table while her partner, Agent Todd Vaughn, positioned himself by the window with a clear view of the street. Mr. Caldwell, let's start with what you know about the intelligence that was leaked regarding Bradley Cooper's business activities. Rick kept his hands flat on the table, projecting calm cooperation. I know that Bradley Cooper was laundering money for organized crime through his law practice. I know he was sexually assaulting young women. And I know he was using his political connections to protect himself. That's not what I asked, Agent Richmond said. I asked what you know about how that information was obtained. I assumed through proper investigative channels. Agent Vaughn snorted from his position by the window. Proper investigative channels don't provide the kind of detailed surveillance data that ended up in that FBI package. Phone records, financial transactions, encrypted communications. That's NSA-level intelligence. Rick met his eyes calmly. I wouldn't know anything about that. Agent Richmond leaned forward. Mr. Caldwell, we know about your background. 20 years military intelligence, 8 years with NSA's Special Activities Division. You have the contacts and the knowledge to obtain classified surveillance data. Had, Rick corrected. Past tense. I've been out of that world for 2 years. People don't just leave that world, Agent Vaughn said. They carry it with them. Rick was about to respond when his phone buzzed with a text message. Agent Richmond gestured for him to check it. The message was from Neil Landry. Bradley's dead. Apparent suicide in his apartment an hour ago. Rick stared at the screen, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Justice, regret, and something that might have been relief. Bad news? Agent Richmond asked. Rick showed her the message. She read it, her expression unreadable. Well, she said finally, that changes things considerably. Agent Vaughn moved away from the window. Suicide, or was he helped along? According to the initial report, he left a note confessing to the money laundering and sexual assault charges. Says he couldn't face the shame of a trial. Rick set the phone down carefully. That's unfortunate. Agent Richmond studied his face. Is it? The man was sleeping with your wife, destroying your marriage, and trying to steal your home. Most people would consider his death a convenient resolution. I'm not most people. No, you're not. You're a trained intelligence operative with the skills to destroy a man's life so thoroughly that suicide seems like his only option. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. Rick could hear Ashley moving around upstairs, probably packing or cleaning. Anything to keep busy while federal agents questioned her husband. Agent Richmond, Rick said quietly, are you arresting me? That depends on what you tell me about how classified surveillance data ended up in the hands of the FBI. Rick nodded slowly. He'd known this moment would come from the second he'd asked Joseph for help. The choice now was whether to drag Joseph down with him or find another path. I leaked the information, he said. Agent Vaughn straightened. You're confessing to obtaining classified intelligence. I'm confessing to leaking information I already possessed. Information I gathered during my time with the NSA before my retirement. Agent Richmond frowned. That's not possible. The surveillance data was current, dated within the last 6 months. Rick smiled. Agent Richmond, what do you know about deep cover assets? Long-term intelligence operations. Agents placed in positions where they can gather information over extended periods. Exactly. Now, what if I told you that my marriage to Ashley wasn't my first connection to Bradley Cooper's activities? The two agents exchanged glances. This wasn't the direction they'd expected the conversation to go. What are you saying? Agent Richmond asked. Rick leaned back in his chair, adopting the relaxed posture of someone settling in for a long story. 3 years ago, the NSA received intelligence about a money laundering operation in this city. High-end law firms being used to clean cash for Eastern European crime syndicates. I was assigned to investigate. Go on. The operation required deep cover. I needed to become someone who could move in those circles naturally. Someone wealthy enough to need high-end legal services, connected enough to attract attention from corrupt attorneys. Rick paused, letting them process the implications. You're saying your entire life here was a cover identity? Agent Vaughn asked. I'm saying Rick Caldwell, the retired veteran, was the perfect cover for Rick Caldwell, the intelligence operative. My marriage, my house, my civilian identity, all designed to put me in position to investigate Bradley Cooper and others like him. Agent Richmond was taking notes now. And Ashley, your wife, unknowing asset. Her work at the marketing firm put her in contact with the right social circles. When she started having trouble in our marriage, it was natural for her to seek legal advice. I encouraged her to see Bradley Cooper specifically. You set up your own wife? Rick's expression hardened. I protected my wife. Ashley was never in any real danger because I was monitoring the situation the entire time. Then why not arrest Cooper earlier? Why wait until now? Because Cooper was small fish. The NSA wanted the entire network. Cooper's death terminates the investigation, but not before we gathered intelligence on every politician, judge, and law enforcement official in his pocket. Rick pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact labeled Joe Insurance. He hit send on a pre-written message. Package delivered. Operation complete. That message just went to my handler, Rick said. Within the hour, you'll receive confirmation of everything I've told you, along with complete files on the money laundering network we've been tracking. Agent Richmond stared at him. If this is true, why didn't you identify yourself when we arrived? Because the operation required absolute compartmentalization. Until Bradley Cooper was neutralized, my cover had to remain intact. Agent Vaughn was frowning. This doesn't feel right. The timeline doesn't work. Rick shrugged. Check with NSA. Ask for Operation Prometheus. Your clearance level probably won't give you access to details, but they'll confirm that Rick Caldwell was an active asset until this morning. Agent Richmond's phone rang. She answered, listened for several minutes, then hung up with a puzzled expression. That was my supervisor. NSA just contacted the Bureau. They're confirming an active operation in this jurisdiction and requesting we coordinate our investigation with their asset debrief. Rick stood up. I assume that means I'm free to go. For now. But don't leave town. There will be extensive debriefing sessions over the next several weeks. As the agents prepared to leave, Agent Richmond paused at the door. Mr. Caldwell, if what you're telling us is true, then you've spent 3 years of your life in deep cover, sacrificing your marriage and your civilian identity to bring down a criminal network. That's the job. And if you're lying, you've just committed multiple federal felonies while confessing to others. Rick met her eyes steadily. I guess we'll find out which one it is. After they left, Rick stood in his kitchen, processing what he'd just done. Upstairs, he could hear Ashley's footsteps moving from room to room. His phone buzzed with a message from Joseph. Prometheus files are now classified. Your story will hold. But Rick, this makes us more than even. This makes us buried. Rick deleted the message and walked upstairs to find Ashley sitting on their bed, staring at a framed photo from their honeymoon. How much of what you told them was true? She asked without looking up. Rick sat beside her. The important parts. Which parts were those? The part about protecting you. The part about loving you. The part about some things being worth fighting for. Ashley finally looked at him. And the rest? Rick smiled. The rest is just a story I told to keep us both out of federal prison. She was quiet for a moment, processing everything. Then she laughed. A short, sharp sound that contained surprise, admiration, and just a hint of fear. Who are you, Rick Caldwell? Rick took the photo from her hands, looking at their younger selves smiling on an Italian beach. I'm the man who loves you enough to lie to the FBI to protect you. I'm the man who destroyed Bradley Cooper because he threatened what we had. And I'm the man who's asking if you want to try again. Ashley looked into his eyes, seeing him clearly for the first time in years. Yes, she said simply. I want to try again. Outside, a news van was pulling up to the curb. The Bradley Cooper story was about to become national news, and Rick Caldwell, retired veteran and innocent bystander, would be portrayed as another victim of a corrupt attorney's schemes. It was exactly what he'd planned. Chapter 8. Smoke and Mirrors. The morning news painted Rick Caldwell as a sympathetic figure, the veteran whose marriage had been destroyed by a predatory attorney, who'd fought back through legitimate channels only to watch justice take its tragic course when Bradley Cooper chose suicide over accountability. Rick sat in his study, watching CNN's coverage while monitoring encrypted communications on his laptop. The story was holding perfectly. NSA had classified Operation Prometheus so thoroughly that even the FBI agents who'd questioned him would never see the full files. As far as the official record was concerned, Rick Caldwell had been exactly what he'd claimed to be. The truth was more complicated. There had never been an Operation Prometheus. Rick had created it retroactively, using ghost protocols he'd helped design during his NSA years, systems meant to hide operations so sensitive that they needed to exist outside normal oversight channels. Joseph McCann had activated the protocols from his end, creating a paper trail that would satisfy any investigation while being impossible to verify without clearances that didn't exist. It was the perfect lie wrapped around an essential truth. Rick Caldwell had destroyed Bradley Cooper to protect his marriage. Everything else was just administrative details. His phone rang. Ashley's number. "Hey," he answered. "Turn on channel 7. Rick switched channels to find a reporter standing outside Bradley's penthouse building. Behind her, a hearse was pulling away. Sources confirmed that Cooper left behind what appears to be a comprehensive confession, detailing not only his own crimes, but implicating several prominent political figures in what investigators are calling the largest money laundering scheme in state history. Rick smiled grimly. Bradley's final act had been to take down everyone who'd enabled him. Whether from guilt, spite, or a desire for posthumous revenge, he'd burned his entire network to the ground. "Rick," Ashley's voice on the phone. "I'm here. Are you watching this?" "Yeah." "Do you feel anything about him being dead?" Rick considered the question carefully. "I feel like justice was served. I feel like you're safe. And I feel like we have a chance to start over. That's all. That's everything." Ashley was quiet for a moment. "I keep thinking about what you said yesterday. About not being most people. What about it? I think I'm starting to understand what you meant." That afternoon, Rick drove to a storage unit across town. Inside, behind boxes of Christmas decorations and old furniture, he opened a steel cabinet containing items from his NSA years. False identities, encrypted communication devices, emergency funds in various currencies. He packed it all into a duffel bag, drove to a bridge over the Potomac River, and threw it into the water. Rick Caldwell, the intelligence operative, was officially dead. What remained was exactly what he'd told the FBI agents, a retired veteran trying to rebuild his marriage. When he got home, Ashley was in the kitchen making dinner, something she hadn't done in months. "Smells good," he said, kissing her cheek. "Just spaghetti. I figured we should start simple." They ate in comfortable silence, both of them processing the events of the past few days. Outside, the news vans had finally moved on to other stories. "Rick," Ashley said as they cleaned dishes together, "there's something I need to ask you." "Okay. When you decided to go after Bradley, was it really about protecting me? Or was it about winning?" Rick dried a plate carefully, thinking about his answer. "Does it matter?" "Yes, it matters to me." He set the plate down and turned to face her. "It was about both. I couldn't stand the idea of him taking you away from me, but I also couldn't stand the idea of him thinking he could destroy people and walk away clean. And if I'd chosen him anyway, if I decided to stay with him despite everything, then I would have let you go." Ashley studied his face. "You mean that?" "I mean that. I destroyed Bradley Cooper because he was a predator who deserved to be destroyed. The fact that it brought you home was a bonus." She nodded slowly. "I can live with that." "Can you?" "Because Ashley, what I did, the lies I told, the laws I broke, the man I became to make it happen, that's who I really am. Not the nice, safe civilian you thought you married." Ashley moved closer, reaching up to touch his face. "The man I thought I married would have let Bradley Cooper steal everything that mattered and then felt noble about taking the high road. The man you really are fought back and won. Even though I lied to you, even though you lied to everyone, including the FBI." Rick laughed, surprised by her acceptance. "You're not scared of what I'm capable of." "I'm terrified," Ashley said simply. "But I'm also proud. And I'm also in love with you again for the first time in 2 years." That evening, they sat on their couch watching old movies like they used to in the early days of their marriage. Ashley curled against Rick's side, her head on his shoulder, both of them pretending that everything was normal. Rick's encrypted phone, the one Ashley didn't know about, buzzed with a message from Joseph McCann. Operation Prometheus files have been permanently sealed. Rick Caldwell is officially retired from all government service. Congratulations on your successful transition to civilian life. Rick deleted the message and turned off the phone. From now on, there would be no more encrypted communications, no more classified operations, no more Rick Caldwell the intelligence operative. There would only be Rick Caldwell the husband, trying to rebuild a marriage with a woman who'd finally seen him clearly and decided to stay anyway. As the credits rolled on the movie, they weren't really watching. Ashley looked up at him. Rick? Yeah. No more secrets? Rick kissed the top of her head, holding her close. No more secrets. It was a lie, of course. There would always be secrets, pieces of his past, capabilities he'd never use again, knowledge that would forever separate him from the normal world Ashley wanted them to inhabit. But it was the right lie, the kind of lie that protected something worth protecting. And Rick Caldwell had always been very good at telling the right lies. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 6 months later, Rick Caldwell was mowing his lawn when the black sedan pulled into his driveway. He'd been expecting this visit since the day FBI agent Richmond had walked out of his kitchen, but seeing it actually happen still sent a familiar chill down his spine. The man who got out of the car was someone Rick recognized from his NSA days, Deputy Director Stuart Wilson, a career bureaucrat who'd survived 5 administrations by being simultaneously indispensable and invisible. Rick, Wilson said, approaching with the careful neutrality of a diplomat entering hostile territory. Stuart, you're looking well. May we speak privately? Rick glanced toward the house, where Ashley was visible through the kitchen window, preparing lunch. She'd noticed the car, but was pretending not to watch. The garage, Rick said. They walked into the 2-car garage, and Rick pulled the door closed behind them. Wilson looked around at the normal suburban detritus, lawn mower, garden tools, Ashley's tennis equipment. Domestic life suits you, Wilson observed. It has its advantages. Wilson smiled thinly. I'm here about Operation Prometheus. I figured. There's no record of any such operation in NSA files. Rick shrugged. Above your pay grade, apparently. Rick, I know what you did. I know how you created a retroactive deep cover operation to explain away intelligence that should never have been in civilian hands. I know you manipulated our classification systems and used Joseph McCann to legitimize a completely fabricated mission. Rick met his eyes calmly. Prove it. I don't need to prove it. I'm here to offer you a job. That was unexpected. Rick had prepared for threats, blackmail, even arrest. A job offer hadn't made his list of possibilities. I'm retired. You're wasted. What you accomplished with the Bradley Cooper situation, it was elegant. Thorough. The kind of precision work that takes real talent. I protected my marriage. You identified a target, gathered intelligence, coordinated with multiple agencies, and executed a flawless operation that eliminated a criminal network while maintaining perfect operational security. All while under intense personal stress. Wilson paused. We need people with your capabilities. Rick looked toward the house, where Ashley was now openly watching them through the window. Not interested. The position comes with full legitimacy. Official cover, government salary, the kind of work you can tell your wife about. Counterintelligence consulting, training new assets, case review for operations that have gone sideways. Still not interested. Wilson reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. Before you decide, you should know that we've identified 17 other attorneys across 6 states running similar operations to Bradley Cooper's. Money laundering, political corruption, sexual exploitation. The whole network is still active. Rick didn't touch the envelope. Not my problem, isn't it? These people are still out there, still destroying lives. Still taking advantage of women like your wife. Ashley's safe. That's all I care about. Wilson set the envelope on the workbench. Look at the files, Rick. Names, addresses, financial records. Everything you'd need to shut them down properly. And if I'm not interested, then I walk away and never contact you again. But those files stay here. What you do with the information is entirely up to you. Wilson headed for the door, then paused. One more thing. Joseph McCann sends his regards. He's been reassigned to a desk job in Omaha, effective immediately. The threat was subtle but clear. Joseph had paid a price for helping Rick. Others might pay prices too if Rick didn't cooperate. After Wilson left, Rick stood in the garage staring at the envelope. He could burn it, throw it away, pretend this conversation had never happened. Instead, he opened it. The first file was for a law firm in Chicago. The second was in Denver. The third was right here in town. A family practice that specialized in high-net-worth divorces, just like Bradley Cooper's firm. As Rick read through the intelligence summaries, he felt the familiar analytical calm settling over him. Pattern recognition, threat assessment, operational planning, skills he'd thought he was done using. The garage door opened, and Ashley stepped inside. "Who was that?" she asked. "Someone from my old job." She looked at the files spread across the workbench. "What do they want?" Rick closed the folders. "They want me to come back. Are you going to?" Rick studied her face, looking for any sign of the fear or resentment that had characterized their marriage during his active years. Instead, he saw curiosity and something that might have been excitement. "Would you be okay with it if I did?" Ashley moved closer, looking down at the files. "Are these people like Bradley?" "Worse. And you could stop them?" "Probably." She nodded slowly. "Then I think you should do it." Rick stared at her. "Ashley, if I take this job, there will be travel. Strange hours. Situations I can't talk about. All the things that drove us apart before." "The things that drove us apart before were secrets and lies," Ashley said. "This would be official. Legal. Something you could be proud of instead of something you had to hide." Rick gathered the files into a neat stack. "It would also be dangerous." Ashley smiled, the same smile that had first caught his attention at that military charity gala 12 years ago. "Rick, I fell in love with a man who spent his life protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. I lost that man somewhere along the way, and I thought he was gone forever." She touched his hand. "But he's not gone. He's just been on vacation." That evening, Rick called Stuart Wilson. "I'll take the job," he said. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "I work alone. No partners, no oversight except at the operational level. And I choose my own targets." "Agreed. And Ashley knows everything. No more classified marriages." Wilson was quiet for a moment. "That's irregular." "Those are my terms." "Very well. Welcome back to government service, Rick. Officially this time." Rick hung up the phone and found Ashley waiting in the kitchen with 2 glasses of wine. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. "To new beginnings," Rick agreed. As they drank, Rick thought about the files in his garage. 17 law firms, dozens of corrupt attorneys, hundreds of victims who deserved justice. Bradley Cooper had been just the beginning. But this time, Rick Caldwell wouldn't be working alone in the shadows, carrying the weight of secrets that poisoned everything they touched. This time, he'd have something he'd never had before. A partner who understood exactly what kind of man she'd married and loved him not despite it, but because of it. It was going to be interesting. Outside, the city sparkled with lights, full of predators who thought themselves untouchable and victims who thought themselves helpless. They were all about to learn what Ashley had discovered. Underestimating Rick Caldwell was the last mistake you'd ever make. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.